It's a little terrifying because you absolutely cannot miss.
Goalies now are completely at a premium.
Not, right? Like, Canada doesn't have a ton of great options.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Hockey News Big Show special edition. We've got a mailbag on tap for you guys. You ask the questions, we are here to answer them. Katie Gaus alongside Michael Traikos and Ryan Kennedy. And guys, we're into the middle of summer now. There's still little things trickling in, but overall, it's a great time to answer some questions, big picture questions, things people are wondering about for next season, just random hockey thoughts, whatever it is. We've got plenty of questions to get to today. So shout out to everyone who participated in the mailbag. We're excited to get it started, and we will be making sure to give you a shout out as well. Let's kick things off with Michael's favorite topic. Had to kick the show off with this one. It's about Toronto. So will the Leafs Forever fans miss Mitch Marner more than they think? Courtesy of @TD Chris G, who's the Hockey News Collectibles site editor. So Michael, start us off. What do you think?
This is an easy one, Katie. 100% they're going to miss Mitch Marner. And, you know, how do you not miss a player who puts up 100 points, who kills penalties, who's, you know, one of your better defensive forwards, a playmaker, a guy that helps Auston Matthews get close to 70 goals. So, yeah, they're missing him, and they're missing him even more because, you know, they didn't replace Marner. And I think that was the big failure this summer. Is it's one thing to let him go out the door. It's another thing to, you know, replace him basically, or, you know, not replace him with a bunch of fourth line players who are going to come in and basically fill more secondary roles. So, you know, I still think the Leafs are a playoff team. We've talked about this. I don't think they're as good as they were last year. And I'm kind of curious to see what the future does hold for them.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly still some work to be done. Ryan, what do you think about how much they might miss him? And maybe we could also touch on, is there still anything left for Treliving to do? Because, you know, the speculations are still out there, but it's kind of getting to the point where there's not a lot of options left on the table.
Yeah, it feels to me that right now Toronto needs to see what they have internally. And I think that'll go a long way in also figuring out how much the fans miss Mitch Marner. I don't think we're going to get an accurate assessment in the regular season. I really think it's going to come down to how this Toronto team does in the playoffs. And that was the flashpoint that sort of got us to where we are today, right? Is the fans were not happy with how Marner performed in those clutch games, you know, games 5, 6, 7 of a series. And, you know, if you look at Toronto right now, yeah, as Mike said, you're not going to replace a 100-point guy who's also an amazing penalty killer. But is this team going to be maybe a bit more well-rounded because guys are going to have to step up? You hope that Auston Matthews is 100% healthy or as close to it as possible, which means you're probably going to get, you know, another 15, 20 points out of Matthews versus what he did this past season. You're going to get growth from Matthew Nyes. You are going to ask yourself, you know, what can Nick Robertson and or Easton Cowan provide in a top 6 role? What will Matthias Michelli do as the new guy trying to be in the top 6? Nick Waugh, who they acquired for Mitch Marner, is he going to be a big upgrade at third line center, or is he the fourth line center and a huge upgrade there? I think these are all questions, and for Brad Treliving, you know, like there's not a lot of guys left out there unless you were to make a hockey trade, and that seems like it would be more a during the season type of thing. So yeah, they're going to miss him, but what happens if the Leafs go to the conference final, or dare I say it, the Stanley Cup final this season? Then I think obviously their opinions will change.
And another guy to watch, Ryan and Katie, is William Nylander. And he had 45 goals, 84 points this year while playing with John Tavares. I imagine he's going to get tried out on a line with Auston Matthews. Can he turn 45 goals into maybe 55 goals or even 60 if he's playing with Matthews? Or is that maybe not a fit because both guys like to be the shooter? But, you know, if those two guys can form the same sort of 1-2, you know, chemistry that Marner and Matthews had, then maybe you don't miss Marner as much.
Quick bonus question before we go to our next mailbag question. What will the reception be like when Marner comes back to Toronto for the first time?
That's a good one. I don't think he gets booed. They
I don't
already
know. He might.
booed him enough in
Game
7. So, they
I
got
think
their wish.
some of the stuff that came out after he left about like he was talking to guys about Vegas and like had been thinking about it since Four Nations. Maybe that'll affect people.
This might sound counterintuitive, but I can see him getting booed at the beginning of the game, and then when they do the scoreboard jumbotron tribute to Marner as a Leaf, everybody will applaud.
Okay.
Well, what was Marner's defining moment in Toronto, Ryan? Does he have one?
In a Leaf jersey? Because, his defining moment technically was probably at the Four Nations.
I was just going to say that.
Good point.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he had a defining moment. Like, when you think of Austin Matthews, it's, getting the Rocket Richard trophy.
4 goals in his first game.
Yeah, 100%. Like, when you're talking about Marner, I don't know what it is. Like, there wasn't a play in the playoffs where you're going, okay, that was a game that you're looking at him going, okay, that was the defining moment. So, when you're looking back on it, he put up a lot of points, but, I don't want to say they're meaningless, but they weren't meaningful.
It just felt like it was a lot of sustained excellence for Marner versus one particular moment, which is kind of interesting. But again, for a team that hasn't had a lot of playoff success, that tends to happen, right?
Yeah, I think that's the issue is like some of the most defining moments when you think back on great players come when you're winning a series, clinching a series, going to the Stanley Cup final, whatever it might be. And that never happened. Not much, at least the winning the series part. All right, let's move on to our next question. Which team will be the biggest surprise this season from Leo Educated? Michael?
I'm going to go with the Minnesota Wild. This is a team that last year, and I know we've talked about this on the show before, but at one point they were one of the best teams in the NHL. Yeah. And then they lost Kirill Kaprizov. They had a spate of injuries that really sort of set them back. And, they were not an easy out in the playoffs, but I do believe that with a healthy Kaprizov, with Matt Boldy now in his prime, Brock Faber in his prime, you're adding Zeev Buium to that blue line, so you have another mobile guy that can really help offensively as well, even though he will be a rookie. I just feel like, the Central is still really difficult, but I think Minnesota is going to give teams a lot of fits, and I think, this could be the year that they make at least a little bit of a playoff run.
Yeah, I agree with you. Minnesota was just they were a thorn in team sides all year, Ryan. And another team that wasn't that far off was the Utah Mammoth. And I really liked what they did last year with the growth of their young guys. And, to that group, now they're adding, a JJ Peterka. They got a Brandon Tanev. I thought they had a really good offseason. I think the health of their back end is going to be really important. But the big thing for me is now they finally got a name. They got something to kind of rally behind. Like we know it's the Mammoth, not the hockey club. I think this is going to be a year where you could see the Mammoth finally, pushing forward towards that wild card spot. And it's not easy. There's a lot of teams in front of them, but, with how many young players they have and how many good young players they have, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility.
The best part is that every time someone writes an article now about them, when they're referring to the guy as the Mammoth, you're going to say the Mammoth forward or the Mammoth defenseman. And you're going to be thinking, God, these guys are all massive. What the heck is this team built out of?
You have now inspired me, Katie. I will definitely at some point in print refer to somebody, maybe Dmitry Simashev, as the Mammoth player.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lowercase, uppercase with Mammoth. And then you're like, he's actually only 5'11". So
yeah, Mammoth, Daniel Boot, who is 6'5".
You can say like the diminutive Mammoth forward.
Yes, diminutive Mammoth Logan Cooley.
We know that Ryan's going to come up with lots of fun things with his writing now. All right,
I am unleashed.
The Pittsburgh Penguins, will they finish dead last this season? From A1 Baliska.
I think that's the goal. When you've got Sidney Crosby, good luck convincing him that, you're aiming for the number 1 overall pick, because Katie, Crosby probably better than the three of us, or Ryan and I.
Yeah.
That's not in his DNA.
No.
Losing, going for a tank job just doesn't really equate to what Crosby's been doing. But, you look at the moves that they made or that they haven't made, and all signs point to this should be a year where they get at least a top 3 pick.
It's funny that like all the conspiracy theories are already out there about, the Penguins getting Gavin McKenna because they have had such tremendous luck with generational players over the years.
He's right down the road now.
Yeah, but I mean, that's true. Yeah, I mean, Penguins fans can go watch him.
Oh yeah,
semi-frequently.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. But I agree. I mean, they're not going to be that bad because they have Crosby. I don't even think they'll be the worst in their division. Like I think Philly probably still has a lot of work to do in that regard. But the funny thing is, I do think they're going to miss the playoffs and be eligible for the lottery. And we just saw the New York Islanders make a huge jump up to number 1, in which case they drafted Matthew Schaefer. So it's certainly possible that Pittsburgh gets the number 1 pick overall. I just think that teams like Chicago and Philly, and to a lesser extent San Jose, are still going to be worse than the Penguins in the standings. Yeah. But I am totally prepared for everybody who is not a Pittsburgh fan to lose their minds if they got Gavin McKenna.
The problem is that
the other thing to kind of consider is Crosby and Malkin have been unusually really healthy the last couple of years. And I don't think that can hold up. And if Crosby does get hurt, misses more than 20 games, then
they're toast.
Yeah, I think they are a worse team than Chicago or San Jose. I forget who else you mentioned there, like Philly. I don't think Philly's that bad, to be honest. Like they only finished 4 points back of the Penguins. And now
they're not terrible. They're just like, in that division, who else is worse?
No, I agree. And, they're probably all going to be battling for that number 1 or the odds to get the number 1 overall pick.
Well, the thing is Terry Pagula has put so much, money into the Penn State program between the rink and everything else that sort of paved the way for them to be where they are, to be, getting a guy like Gavin McKenna. So I think the conspiracy theory is, all right, well, how are we going to get Gavin McKenna to the Buffalo Sabres?
Right.
We want this in value. He's like, I put money into this kid, essentially. Now I need him on my team. So, I mean, who knows? Buffalo certainly. Always
is Buffalo worse than Pittsburgh, Ryan?
I am kind of worried about the Sabres. Like when you look at that lineup, it's like, did they get better or worse this summer? Like they lost JJ Peterka. But like with internal growth, are they any better? I am definitely concerned about the Sabres, especially in that division where everybody else that was sort of like just above them got better.
Well, let's jump ahead then to a mailbag question I had slated for a little bit later, but it was, do you think the Sabres will trade Bo Byram? We saw him obviously going to arbitration, signing the deal for 2 years at $6.25 million per. But is this something that could be happening now during the season? I guess, what does the future look like for Bo Byram with Buffalo? And that is courtesy of a question from Terry C. Hockey 99.
Here's my question about this. Is if you trade Bo Byram, who do you trade him for? Because if you're Buffalo, you can't get worse on purpose this year. Like the fans just will not stand it, right? Like you have to put it, like you have to try to make the playoffs this year. And like I said, like I'm not sure if they can do it. Like if they put it all together, I mean, they do have some very good players, and that back end right now, Byram, Dahlin, Owen Power, that should be the basis of a very good blue line, a very mobile blue line, and they have some size with Samuelsson and now Kesselring as well. But who do you trade? Like how can you make a hockey trade? I was trying to think like, could they trade him for, like a top 6 forward from a team that needs some like cap relief. But like all those players have no move clauses or no trade clauses. And what team is always on the no trade clause? Buffalo.
Yeah.
So you really have to kind of grow players internally, or, you acquired Byram originally. You really have to make that kind of work out for you. So, I mean, Mike, I think I know what you're going to say, but my question is like, who do you trade him for?
Well, it's a tradable contract. I'll start off with that. Like, they didn't sign him to an outrageous figure or a crazy term where you're going, okay, that's an albatross that you're not going to be able to move. Let's not forget, Ryan, like Byram was part of a hockey trade when, he got to Buffalo in exchange for Casey Middlestat. So I think the challenge is to find a similar Byram type player. And unfortunately, it's probably a forward. Like you're looking for, a better version of Middlestat, obviously. Like you wouldn't trade him for, that type of player now, but you're basically looking for a top 6 forward who needs a change of scenery. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anyone that fits that mold, but they've traded with Utah already, and Utah has an abundance of young players who might be looking for just a better opportunity, more ice time, what have you. So, that's my kind of suggestion.
All right. Well, we will see what happens with Bo. But I do think, when you look at the fact that Middlestat is now no longer with Colorado, by acquiring him, they did get, they get the win in that trade. And if they can turn it around into something that helps them more, I guess we'll see. All right, here we go. Let's talk about Connor Bedard. What do you predict Bedard's next contract will look like? From Vinny Parise, our Chicago Blackhawks site editor. So thanks for that, Vinny. All right, what do we think, Bedard? What's he going to get?
Okay, so I was looking at like when Jack Hughes was done his entry-level deal, he had worse numbers than Bedard has right now. But like Bedard, Hughes was a number 1 overall pick. He ended up signing 8 times 8. Obviously, the cap has gone up significantly since then. So if you're going to go long-term with Bedard, and if you're Chicago, you don't have to really worry about the cap situation right now. Like,
no,
that's all free and clear.
No.
I think the thing that you want is you want 8 years out of Connor Bedard. And I would probably start it around like 9.5 to 10 million. So an 8 times 10 deal, I think, looks really good with especially with how the cap is going up right now. And like I said, the numbers haven't been outstanding, but when you compare them to what Hughes was doing, they look a lot better. And we're talking about a guy who, has won a Calder already.
I wonder, because Jack Hughes is a very good comparable. I was also looking at Nathan McKinnon because, he didn't become a superstar right away in the NHL. He had a very good rookie season, but then, he had sort of the sophomore slump. He didn't hit like superstar status until year 5. And I think with Bedard, like he took a step back as a sophomore as well. His points per game were down. He had a lot more penalty minutes, and it wasn't because he was fighting. So I'm wondering, in this sort of new landscape, and also thinking about what Austin Matthews signed his last time in Toronto, I'm wondering if Bedard and the Hawks say, let's do not a bridge, obviously, but like 5 years. And I'd have to look to see if he would still be an RFA at the time. But
he's only
like
19 right now. So
he's only 19. Yeah. So like, what if they did 5 years times 10, which is, still very good. And it helps the Hawks, be above the cap floor. But with Bedard, it would be motivation to become that superstar where, you're probably quote unquote overpaid for the first year or two, but then you're underpaid for the next few, much like Nathan McKinnon was underpaid for, some of his contract, which granted was longer than 5 years. But then when that next contract comes, who knows what the cap will be at that point. And maybe Bedard is making like 15 or 17 a year on the next contract, which would be like 7 years.
Yeah, I could see that happening. A lot of players are now kind of saying, I don't want that security of 8 years. I'd rather go 5 for exactly what you said. And I think it puts the pressure on the organization too, Ryan, because, they have to now think, okay, I don't just have this guy for indefinitely. I only have, he's still going to be an RFA, but, they really do have to prove something to him and the rest of the players there that, they're not going to just be terrible year after year after year. And, I think more teams are kind of afraid of being the next Buffalo Sabres. So, there should be pressure on the Chicago Blackhawks in getting that deal done.
Meanwhile, the Florida Panthers are handing out long-term deals, and they've got everybody locked up to like 2050. So, but they've already proven themselves because they're back-to-back champs. So, different strokes for different folks. Everybody wants to stay in Florida, and the contracts prove it. All right, well, let's talk about the biggest sleeper team going into the 2026 season from our very own intern, Wyatt Thomas, 736. Guys, what do we think?
I'm going to go with the St. Louis Blues. And again, a team that gave Winnipeg fits in the playoffs and couldn't quite finish off the Jets. But you have a Blues lineup that's pretty solid already. And again, I think you'll continue to see some internal growth from guys like Broberg and Holloway and Jake Neighbors. I just think that, the Blues are a little bit slept on. Again, it's like being in a tough Western Conference where you're maybe not the first team that everybody thinks of, but St. Louis just seems to find a way to get into the playoffs. And they are still a veteran club. They still have Braden Shen. Colton Parayko has now been there for quite a while. Even guys like Kyrou and Thomas, they're still young, but they're experienced. So I'm very interested to see what the Blues can do. I definitely think they could be a sleeper.
Yeah, I might be eating these words in a couple months, but I think the Anaheim Ducks could be one of those teams that there's always a team that totally exceeds expectations. And, getting Quenneville as a head coach, I think was a smart move. Getting some veterans like Chris Kreider and, you already have a Trouba. That's going to help. Obviously, what doesn't help is losing John Gibson, losing Trevor Zegras. But I think you have enough young guys that, are going to be looking for expanded roles, whether it's a Mason McTavish, whether it's a Leo Carlson, that you might not miss a Zegras as much. And, they're just one of those sneaky teams that I think, they're almost ready to kind of make that mini jump to at least being a competitive team looking at a wild card spot. I don't know if they're going to get it, but at the same time, they're in a division where, they very well could sneak ahead of maybe a Vancouver and get that spot.
Mm-hmm.
Like it, and I'm very interested to see this season what the influence of Joel Quenneville as the head coach does, right? Because he has such a reputation for having intensity, even in every single practice. I think he's going to take them to another level in terms of kind of what the expectations are there every single night. He's an excellent coach, so it'll be interesting to see how he rubs off on Anaheim and what that team looks like under his guidance. All right, we've got a statement followed by our question. I believe if Arturs Silovs had played better at the beginning of last season, he would still be in the Canucks organization. What say you? From Al Nielsen 6.
Mm-hmm.
This is like if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a bike kind of question here.
Yes.
Okay. Ryan, you start us off because, there were so many factors as to why, everything went wrong.
Right.
And why guys are no longer there. Silovs is a different one.
Yeah, I don't think it would matter, simply because like Thatcher Demko's your guy, right? And, he's had injury problems, but, he is your goalie with the highest upside, and he has proven to be, a number one goalie for important stretches for them. And then, of course, you get Kevin Lankinen, who has also in his career had some very surprisingly good runs and is a veteran. I just think with Silovs, it's like you couldn't keep him in Abbotsford another year or two, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he's going to say like, hey, like I've earned the right to get a legitimate NHL crack, like a regular spot, and not just as an injury replacement. So I think this is a matter of the Canucks seeing that and saying like, okay, we have organizational depth at the goaltending position. Can we get some assets for Silovs, sort of striking while the iron is hot? So to me, I mean, maybe if he had been really good, at the onset, maybe everything wouldn't have been an apocalypse in Vancouver this year because winning cures all. But that's a lot to lay at the feet of what was essentially supposed to be your AHL starter this year.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Lankinen, Ryan. I don't think anyone in Vancouver expected him to play 50 plus games last year and to play at the level he did. Like they thought stopgap while Demko gets his health back. And what they ended up with was Lankinen came in and was just a revelation. And I think that was the bigger factor in the sense that, okay, he's not that old either. Like he might
like
just
30.
be 30 years old.
Yeah.
So you've got Lankinen at 30, you've got Demko who's younger, and now you've got a great 1-2 punch where, like you mentioned, what are you going to do with Arturs Silovs? You don't want him playing in Abbotsford. You do want him, either as your backup goalie or to give this kid a chance. And he's going to get a chance in Pittsburgh now. And, he might be going, oh, geez, send me back to the AHL. I changed my mind, guys. I'm willing to wait. But
it's a carousel of goaltending, and you never know what's going to happen every single night between the pipes in Pittsburgh. So you're right. He's certainly going to get a chance. He might end up getting the entire net. You don't know. Might be his. Anything could happen. All right. Well, why did Brian Burke cut Mike Babcock loose after he took the Ducks to the finals? From S. Jimmerd 20941.
Yeah, this is a complicated one because Babcock goes to the final in Anaheim. The next year, the Ducks missed the playoffs. The following year, there's a lockout. And during that lockout, the Anaheim Ducks get a new owner in the Samelis. Oh boy, I'm butchering that name. Yeah, whatever Ryan just said. And they also get a new GM in Brian Burke. And what do we know about Brian Burke? He's got an ego that is probably the size of the entire state of California. And Mike Babcock is probably not that far. So, I know he had a 1-year extension on the table for a guy that, Mike Babcock probably thought he was the best coach in the NHL, even at that point. A 1-year extension to stay in Anaheim was not looking as good as getting a 3-year contract for Detroit. So there's a multitude of factors as to why it didn't work out, but having a new owner, a new GM, and then a lockout that completely took out an entire season didn't really help matters. And, I don't think he complained because ended up winning one cup in Detroit, going to the final another time, and, ended up being the highest paid coach after that while in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
Not bad.
That's
Right.
the answer. I don't have anything to add to that.
And we just got the full history. Michael took care of everything.
Yep.
That is it. All right.
And I'll go on the record. I am a huge Mike Babcock fan. And I still think that,
Cell phone game.
I know why things didn't work out in Columbus, but it just seems like the aura around Mike Babcock is way worse than what the reality was. And being a hard-nosed coach, it used to be just a badge of honor in the NHL. Obviously, we've gone completely the other way. But it just kind of strikes me as odd that Joel Quenneville's back coaching the NHL, and a guy like Mike Babcock, it's like, no, he'll never get a job. It's like, really? Okay, sure.
I think he got his second chance though sooner, like right away, and it was like one of those things. It was like it was already so fresh, and like there was kind of a shock factor about him even getting to go to Columbus.
Even then, like he got a chance to go to Columbus as if like his time in Toronto was marked by all this drama. Like he asked.
Well, there was the Marner scandal,
which is not even like you say scandal, Ryan.
Yeah,
which is like scandal's got connotations for me. Asking a guy to list out the hardest working players on the team and then telling people this is who Mitch thinks is the hardest working players.
No. The scandal was that he told the ones at the bottom of the list, not the top of the list.
And he's
work harder, Leafs. That was a terrible Leafs team. Marner. I'm sorry. They needed to be told that.
No snitches, Mike. No snitches.
Oh my gosh. Snitches get stitches. I mean, good Lord. The poor kid walking into the locker room. Every single person's going to murder him. That was tough.
Babcock narked on him. It's not cool.
I mean, listen, I think bottom line is that we are just in a new era of NHL, new era of coaching. Things that used to happen, you have to adapt. And some coaches have had a harder time adapting than others, but it's definitely, there has to be a little bit of a different approach with the world that we now live in. All right, let's talk about this. How many players from the 2025 draft will start this season in the NHL? From Jared Brown, 97, our OHL site editor.
Mm-hmm. So this is an interesting question because, you always get the players that will get the sort of like 9-game tryout. So they still get the entry level slide.
Yeah.
I still think it's only going to be a couple because, like James Higgins will probably go back to Boston College. So he wouldn't even, be at training camp. I think, Matthew Schaefer with the Islanders, that would be the most obvious one. I could see Porter Martone making the Flyers, but then you get into those interesting ones where you say, like, would Michael Misa be better served with one more year of development before going to San Jose? Anton Frondell has the opportunity to play in the SHL next season after helping his team get bumped up from the Allsvenskan, the second tier. He helped them get that promotion with Jurgen. So I kind of feel like it might only be 2 or 3.
Yeah. When the question was asked, I was just like thinking, how many will even just get that cup of coffee that you're mentioning, Ryan? The 9 and under. And I think the 5 that you mentioned, Schaefer, Misa, Frondell, Martone, and Higgins, I think they all get a taste. Of those, how many stick past the 9-game mark? I'm going to say Schaefer. I'm going to say Schaefer, Frondell, and Martone.
Yeah, Higgins can't get a cup of coffee, though, because then he'd have to sign a contract, and then he could not play for Boston College.
If that happened.
Forgetting that. I think it's the second time you've reminded me that.
Yeah.
Well, now it's weird because like you're getting even more guys that are like going the college route, but you do have to, once you sign that, bye-bye. No more.
Yeah. Do you think that's a good question, Katie. Now, like, do you think that's going to discourage, this factor? Like, does maybe Misa not get a taste because of that, Ryan? Because he wouldn't be able to go to the NCAA.
Yeah, like you want to go to training camp, you can't do that. You want to get a couple games of experience, see where you stack up, but you can't. It's definitely a choice. What do you value more?
And that is the advantage that the CHL still has, is that like Ben Kindle, for example, already signed his entry level deal with Pittsburgh, so he can go to the Penguins training camp, and most likely he'll go back to the WHL, but at least he gets that experience, right?
Yeah, exactly. So many things to figure out. They made these big decisions, and then all the little details have just slowly fallen to the wayside, and we're figuring it out as we go. It'll keep being interesting, I think, to say the least. All right, last one before we switch over to a few rapid fire. This one is from yours truly, myself, because you see Ryan Kennedy right now. He's all business. He's very professional. But what you don't know is that beneath that nice button-up is a variety of graphic t-shirts, and they're always something different. So the question is, how many different graphic tees does Ryan Kennedy own?
Do I get the answer first?
I think you should.
Okay, so I'm not gonna say graphic tees. I'm gonna say concert tees, because they tend to be.
Yeah, well, they all go together. Tees.
So I'm gonna say on a regular basis that he's worn in the last year. I'm gonna go with 6 concert tees or band tees.
Do hoodies count?
Well,
I don't know. Do they?
Throw it in. I mean,
I think they probably should.
They should. All of your.
I know Pig Destroyer is one of them.
Yeah, Power Trip, Wind Hand. I have an Ink and Dagger hoodie that I got when I was 17, so it's like it's almost 30 years old at this point. You're probably right. It probably is about 5 or 6 in the rotation right now that are like just concert t-shirts. Yeah. And then I have ones that like I get my wife to silkscreen me, just like stuff we come up with that I think is funny. That's like another half dozen right there. Oh, and Discount. I also still wear a Discount shirt, which was the band featuring Allison Mosshart, who is now in the Kills. And I've had that since I was like 16 or 17.
How many
Oh,
like
yeah.
hockey tees? Do you have a bunch of hockey tees, teams, things, random old junior?
I mean, I have jerseys. Yeah, not
Okay.
so much t-shirts as jerseys. Although I do have a CompuWare hockey, like the Detroit area.
You've seen this. I love that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, I have that. And that's the second CompuWare hockey t-shirt I owned because I wore out the first one and then I was at USA Hockey Arena in Plymouth, and I was like, and that's where the CompuWare store is because that's where they play out of. So I was like, I need a new CompuWare shirt, and it has to be more orange than the first one. So
Yeah, sometimes we see that poking underneath your pull down there, Ryan.
Yes.
Yeah, it's in the rotation.
Orange is very distinctive. All right.
Ironically, today I just have a plain white t-shirt on underneath my shirt.
Plain white tees.
Like the
Might have been
band.
out of spite for this question.
Plain white tees.
Wow. Ryan has a very eclectic laundry basket. Let's just leave it at that. Lots of good stuff going on there. All right. Well, remember, you don't have to break the bank on sticks when you can get a pro level composite stick without the pro price tag at stix.com. That's STIX.com. Head over and check it out. All right. Rapid fire. We got a couple. Great job on the mailbag. And thanks again to everyone who submit all those questions for us. We'll do it again at some point this summer. All right. Stan Fischler is being inducted into the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. So, should he also be considered to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame?
Oh, this is an easy one, and I hope we're all in agreement here. Stan Fischler 100% should be in the Hall of Fame. We're talking about a guy, I hope he doesn't mind me saying, 93 years old, still writing 3 columns a day for the Hockey News. He's been writing hockey, mostly the Rangers, since the mid 50s. I think his first season was 54-55. So let that sink in. Find a job that you love to do and do it really well. And that's what Stan Fischler has done. And, he's living in Israel right now and still, like I said, writing daily columns. And I'm sure all the Ranger fans would agree that, he deserves to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. But, honest and heartfelt congratulations to Stan on getting into the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. Obviously, it's a great honor.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, he definitely deserves it. Anybody who bought the very first issue of the Hockey News, like when it came, like in person, when it came out, qualifies for legend status. I mean, he is a lifelong hockey fan and has just contributed so much to the discourse over the years. So yeah, shout out to Stan for sure.
Yeah, an awesome honor for the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, and who knows where the future will lie for the actual Hockey Hall of Fame over here. All right, how about this one? One more hockey question, then we got 2 fun ones. Will Gavin McKenna win a Frozen Four with Penn State?
Ooh.
I think it's possible, and I know that some betting odds came out the other day, and Penn State was like the favorite, and people kind of like rolled their eyes at that. But the Nittany Lions went to the Frozen Four this past year, like they made the semifinal because they were a good just overall team with a lot of experience, some older guys. They had some scoring punch with Aiden Fink, and he'll be back. So you got McKenna, you got Jackson Smith coming in, you got Luke Misa coming in, the Calgary Flames pick, Shea Van Ohm, who's coming off a massive final season in the WHL. So I think they have the combination of players where I wouldn't necessarily call them the favorite, but I totally think it could happen.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they're going to win. And, how many times have we seen it? And not just in hockey, but all sports. Like, you put the money in, you can buy yourself a championship. So, Penn State has, beefed up their facilities. Obviously, they're going big game hunting with the prospects. And, the odds are in their favor. Let's put it that way. So I agree with you, Ryan.
I do think it's going to be an interesting dynamic because we see this in other sports throughout college, but this is kind of like the first couple big ones that we're seeing now with college hockey is what the dynamic looks like, in a locker room when you have guys that are making so much money versus guys that are just, it used to just be about getting a college education paid for. Now that's that's all you're going to offer me is an amazing education at all these different schools. So what does that dynamic look like? Does that affect the team chemistry? Does that play a factor? Because this is kind of uncharted territory for hockey. Obviously, it happens all the time in football. You got guys making more than they do when they go pro. But it will be interesting to see if that does play a factor, if this turns into like an all-star team or how that shakes out. But yeah, they're certainly going to be very good with just McKenna alone, not to mention all the names that they've added in addition. All right, here we go. 2 more before we wrap things up. Heat wave or extreme cold? What would you take?
I'll go heat wave. I say you're only allowed to complain about one kind of weather, either hot or cold, and I choose, even though my job involves going to arenas,
Right.
many of which are very cold, I will not complain about hot weather. I'd rather be hot than really cold.
Yeah, you're asking this to 2 guys who are in the GTA, or at least in Ryan's case, the Toronto area, downtown Toronto. And yeah, 100%. I'll take heat wave any day of the week, especially after the brutal winter that we just experienced. So yeah, it always irks me when people complain about how hot it is and they somehow forgot just how the weather was a couple months earlier.
Yeah,
I worked an outdoor game in Rochester years and years ago when I was covering the Amerks and the AHL, and I have never been that cold in my life. I genuinely was on the verge of feeling like I got frostbite, and so I will, to this day, never ever choose cold over heat ever again. There is nothing worse than when your whole body hurts because you are so cold.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going with the heat wave. It's pretty warm here right now. I don't know what it's like where you guys are at. But
It's
again,
hot.
It's really hot.
I'll take it.
And it's fine.
Yes, it's fine. All right, last one. Nintendo Switch 2. Yay or nay? I know nothing about this, so I will let you two discuss.
I'm gonna say yay. I'm a big Switch fan. I got a PS5. I'm a big gamer. I'm huge into Mario Kart online. So, you know, I haven't picked up a Switch 2 yet. I say yet because it's gonna happen. And you know, once I do, I'll make sure to share my handle on Mario Kart because I just love that game online.
Nice.
Right.
I'm gonna go yay because we already bought one. So we should definitely play some Mario Kart. I didn't know about that, Mike. So that's perfect. And also, there's another Tony Hawk for Switch 2. So I'm definitely gonna get that as well.
Nice.
Yeah, I was one of those kids whose parents like literally wouldn't let them have, like, we had one shared Game Boy and it was only for when we went on plane rides. So I was like the kid that went over to someone else's house and was like, oh my gosh, can I see your Wii? This is amazing. But I don't know anything about the video game world. But I would love it. We should, we'll have to do, you guys will have a matchup and we'll record it somehow. We can see how intense it gets. All right. Good stuff, guys. Again, thank you to everyone who contributed questions to this mailbag episode. We had a lot of fun seeing all those coming in online and answering your questions. But that does it for this episode of the Hockey News Big Show. Ryan Kennedy and Michael Traikos, I'm Katie Gaus, and we will see you guys next time.